Hello, fellow aviators, aspiring young aviation professionals, and all who are watching or listening. Welcome to a special edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I'm Vince Mickens. As we transition into the new school year, I felt that it would be great timing to highlight an organization that has a rich history in and of itself, but it's also known for shining a spotlight on legends in aviation and aerospace. From Wilbur and Orville Wright, Bessie Coleman, Amelia Earhart, Bob Hoover, to Federal Express, Fred Smith, NASA's Charlie Bowden, and aviation royalty of people like John and Martha King. With me today are the top of the leadership team for the National Aviation Hall of Fame, which originated in and continues to be based in Dayton, Ohio. Named chairman of the board earlier this year, meet my friend and aviation colleague, Jim Cooling. I say meet Jim, but if you're in our industry, you probably already have, or at least know who he is. Besides founding the Kansas City-based aviation law firm, Cooling and Herbers, Jim is a longtime pilot, graduate of the Fighting Irish Law School, Notre Dame, of course, did his undergrad at the University of Missouri, not far from where I grew up, and in addition to being a past member of NBAA's board of directors, has a list of accomplishments. Well, that would just require a show in its own, just to tell all about Jim's background. So, but Jim, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you,
welcome
Vince.
back, I should say.
Thank you, Vince, and thanks for that nice introduction. My mom would blush.
You're very welcome. I'm so glad to have you back on again. I'm also excited to introduce another good friend and aviation colleague, Doug Schwartz. Doug is another aviation veteran with over 4 decades in the industry, including leading the Global Aviation Services team at ConocoPhillips before retiring and having thousands of hours in several types of business jets. And Doug was also a past member of the NBAA board of directors. And I could also do a show on Doug exclusively. Fun aviation fact, I met both Jim and Doug at NBAA, the National Business Aviation Association. And to round things out, she was also recently installed as the new president and CEO of the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Meet Aimee Maruyama. I said your name properly 3 times before the show, and then I get on the show, and of course, I have to mess it up. Anyhow, Aimee Maruyama, while I have had the pleasure of meeting Aimee, I've already run into her at numerous aviation events, so I kind of feel like I've known her for what I like to call many aviation years. Aimee brings a unique perspective to the National Aviation Hall of Fame with an extensive fundraising background in the nonprofit sector, as well as being a strong advocate for aviation and STEAM education. She has a Master of Management in Resource Ecology from Duke University and received her bachelor's from Antioch College. Aimee, now that I got your name right, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Vince.
It's great to have you. And Doug, I didn't even give you a chance to say hello. I just ran right through my script.
Not a problem, and thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. It's great to have all 3 of you on. And this is a little different show for me to do, but I think the historical factor in our industry is a very important one. And so I wanted to really take the opportunity in a timely way, since you have an enshrinement event coming up in a couple of weeks, and really let people know all about, and actually I think a lot of people in the industry may know or think they know about the National Aviation Hall of Fame, but I would venture to say, even for somebody like me that's gone to your events every year for quite some time, as I was preparing for this show and really looking deeply into your website and looking at the past enshrinees going all the way back to 1962 or something like that, I was just kind of like, wow, this is pretty amazing, the preservation of the history of our industry and what that really means and how that inspires, the future that are going to be enshrined, years from now in the same manner. So really happy to be able to do that. And I think it's appropriate for me to go to you, Jim, and kind of let you talk about the history of the National Aviation Hall of Fame and your involvement with it, and your background that goes way back in aviation. And I have the same color hair, so you can't get
Thanks,
mad.
Vince. Thanks, Vince. When I left the NBAA board after I think 9 years, I was invited by Phil Roberts to join the Dayton-based National Aviation Hall of Fame Board of Trustees. That was about 12 years ago. And so I've had the privilege to learn and work with some wonderful people and learn the history and tradition of the Hall of Fame. And I think one of the important things is that it's Dayton-based. It's co-located with the National Museum of the Air Force, which was one of the most amazing museums in the world for aircraft. It's the only Hall of Fame in the United States chartered by Congress, and we report annually to Congress on what we do. It got started in Dayton because of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers' heirs are still there. Amanda and Stephen are great supporters of our organization. And besides, and we have really 3 different kind of missions that we perform. We do this enshrinement to recognize our people who we want to inspire young people. We have education programs, and then we also have a heritage hall where you can come, and we're putting in an innovation center. I think Aimee ought to talk about those things. But I would say that our mission is to honor aerospace legends, to inspire future leaders. And we try and follow that guide. And then it's not just the leadership team you see here. We have a board of trustees. There are many trustees from Dayton, and we've branched out in the last 10 years to where we now have trustees, around the country. We have Doug in Houston, and we have some great trustees that maybe we can talk about later. But those trustees really contribute, along with the volunteers that we have at the museum, really contribute to the success of the Hall of Fame in their mission to try and honor aerospace legends and inspire future leaders.
Yeah. Jim, as we delve into this, let's dig into your background a little bit. Okay, first of all, the exciting thing about you is you're one of the most passionate people about aviation that I know. Of course, I would say that about several people, but for this purpose in this show, I'm speaking specifically of you. You're passionate about it. You've been involved in aviation and flying in all aspects of aviation for a very long time. You were a big force when you were on the NBAA board, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about your background and how this all came about for you to be so involved in aviation.
I was fortunate that my father was he was actually an instructor in the Army Air Corps, and I was born in Coleman, Texas, right outside the air base there, I guess Army Air Base. And my father then left there and went with TWA and flew international on the Connies, and then went with the FAA. And so I had the good fortune of having my father as a flight instructor, which I didn't pass on to my son. I tried to give him a little more space than my father gave me. And then following that, I kind of, at some point in time, I realized that I wanted to not only fly, which I was able to do and get my ratings and blah, blah, but I was able to tie law together with aviation. And it has been really, really fun. We founded this aviation law firm, and we're pretty much doing a lot of international law now, transactions all over the world. And I guess I tell some people that my summer job in St. Louis for TWA was driving the pot truck for 2 summers. So I
You
started
gotta
as
be
a
careful how you say that, pot truck these days. But anyhow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. This is where when you pull the plunger, everything went down your
as I take a leap. So Aimee, we were talking about the fact, and Jim specifically was saying that you've been drinking out of a fire hose with all that's going on with the National Aviation Hall of Fame. I mean, you inherited a great organization that you now lead. And tell us a little bit about that and your perspective about what the National Aviation Hall of Fame is and will be continuing to do.
Sure. Yeah, well, I started working with the Hall of Fame in 2019. So I knew a little bit about what I was getting into. The former CEO and I partnered on doing a lot of program creation and work on our curriculum pieces. And I think that for me, what's the driving force is really celebrating and sharing the stories of the people who have really shaped the aviation industry. And we do that so that the next generation will know of them, be inspired by them, and become, the next aviation great, so that, the person who takes the job for me 30, 40 years from now will be celebrating these young people that we're inspiring today.
Yeah, we talk about STEM a lot, and aviation STEM specifically, but STEAM is on the front burner for you. Tell us why.
Oh, I think it just takes a couple tours of some aviation manufacturing facilities to see why art is so important to aviation. I mean, aviation, the design, what goes into the inside of a plane, but also how it's shaped. To me, it's all art. And I think it really is important to make sure, as we describe and try to attract people into this industry, especially young people, that we share just the breadth of what aviation careers exist.
Yeah. You're speaking of careers and that type of thing, you're in terms of your education, your emphasis in your education has been in the area of ecology, et cetera. How did that all come about in terms of that translating to what you're involved in now with aviation?
I think really what, for me, the path came in my working with nonprofit organizations. So coming from thinking about sustainability and working with organizations who, mainly in higher ed, who also were focused on ecology and sustainability, and building programs, strategies, and importantly, building the revenue that these organizations need to sustain themselves and really achieve their mission. And following that path is sort of what's led me to aviation. And I think the more I look at and read the stories and celebrate the enshrinees in the Hall of Fame, the more you see that a lot of the work that these people, these innovators are doing is about making the aviation industry more and more sustainable. And I find that incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely. Doug, you've been a longtime advocate of the aviation industry. You've worked in business aviation forever and a day, including running the flight department there at ConocoPhillips, and you're quite accomplished as a pilot yourself on the business jet side of things. So tell us a little bit about that and about your involvement with advocating for this industry.
Well, thanks, Vince. Apropos of the discussion about the Hall of Fame, I think when we talk about recognizing our heroes and inspiring the future, because it is all about the future, right? Takes me back to what my beginnings in aviation, actually, and it was a 5th grade school teacher who inspired me. I was back when I was in the 5th grade. In those days, girls had to leave the class every now and then to take health education classes that the boys weren't allowed to go to. And my teacher, his name was Mr. Allen, had to do something with the boys that were off the curriculum so the class would stay in sync together. He had flown in the Korean War. And so he had us building model airplanes with balsa wood and X-Acto knives And as we would construct the different components, he'd talk about the features of the aircraft and why they were important in the physics of flying and so forth. And he'd pepper all of this with stories about his own flying experiences. And I started looking up at the sky at airplanes. And now 45 years later, I still look up at the sky in airplanes. But it was a fifth grade school teacher that inspired that interest. Interestingly enough, in my story, I didn't believe it was something I could do. And my family never encouraged it. And then later in college, I had a roommate whose father was a private pilot and happened to be, I was visiting with them, and we went in his airplane. He put me in the right seat and let me fly it with him, and I could. There's a message in that, I think, that applies to what we do at the Hall of Fame, and that is when you find your passion, follow it. And believe in yourself that you can do it, and don't ever give up. And isn't that really what Aimee's talking about and Jim's been talking about is with the Hall of Fame? And interestingly about the Hall of Fame, when I was invited to join the board, what I discovered was a place that's role is to choose heroes to inspire the future. And I've always been fascinated by the notion of how we choose our heroes. And when we enshrine folks at the Hall of Fame, we only enshrine a few every year. And there's so many people who are worthy of being enshrined. And how do we choose the ones we choose? And how will they inspire others? It's a daunting task, and it's an interesting and it's important task. So, I feel a lot of my own story in the stories, in the mission of what the Hall of Fame does. And if it weren't for people having inspired me, I wouldn't have had the life I had. And hopefully we can have the same influence on others.
Yeah, speaking of that, Aimee, can you tell us a little bit more about tell us about the education initiatives that you're working on and you guys are planning for the future?
Sure. Our education program is called Discovering Flight with the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and it really does represent that work to meet the second half of our mission to inspire the next generation. And I think the biggest piece of it is our classroom curriculum. It's problem solving with Wilbur and Orville, and it's developed in partnership with PBS, the most trusted name in early childhood education. And we are creating this for grades pre-K through 6. And it really is just sort of it's aligned with national standards and provides an introduction to aviation as it shares lessons in everything from spelling through math, science, and art. And so we've got, I think by the end of this year, we will have that curriculum in just over 6,000 classrooms across Ohio, and we're branching into other states in the U.S. as well now.
Yeah, you guys are all involved in different aspects of the industry. One of the things that I like to point out to particularly young people is that there are so many different opportunities. I mean, Jim, you combine aviation and law, and Doug working in business aviation. There's so many different elements of that, or aspects of that, and for that matter, going back to you, Jim, on the law side, there's so many aspects of aviation law that have to do with flying and with aircraft purchasing, and all of that type of aircraft transactions, et cetera. So can you guys just kind of expand on that about the opportunities that are out there for the younger generation?
I guess I'll go first, but I just want to say that when you listen to Aimee describe the education programs we have and the other things that she's doing, you can see why we hired Korn Ferry to do a national search, and they looked all over the country and they picked Aimee. So we're just very pleased to have Aimee for the National Aviation Hall of Fame. And we did a national search for Doug too when we got him on the board. Doug and I served together at NBAA board for a number of years, so we knew each other. And I always thank Doug for agreeing to come on and do this. But in terms of
I would bet that national search with one phone call, but go ahead.
In terms of opportunities for young people, I mean, today, Aimee is is also working on a Why I Fly program, which I wanted to talk about. It is to inspire the workforce that we need in the aviation industry. Gulfstream and NBAA and Cirrus and all these aviation manufacturers need technicians. They need engineers. There's a shortage of engineers. There's a shortage of, I would say in my business, aviation paralegals. We have been looking for aviation paralegals and want to add aviation paralegals and aviation attorneys. And the industry is very broad from the standpoint of what they do. When you have the FBOs, you have marketing, you have charter sales, you have everything involving safety. You have an entire group of people who have selected to join the FAA, which has a great program, which are looking for controllers. There's just opportunities completely in the aviation industry right now. And the manufacturers and other stakeholders are doing, programs to try and bring people into the industry.
Yeah. Doug, how about from your perspective?
Well, I think Jim captured it pretty well. It's easy to think of aviation as being about pilots and mechanics and so forth, but aviation is an industry and it has to function like any other industry in the world. It needs every kind of discipline, every kind of specialty. And if it can't be run in a way that's safe and efficient and operate like a business should, it can't function at all. So I think as I look at my career in aviation, I look at it as the ultimate people business. And one of the things that we all share in common, regardless of what our discipline is and our role in is aviation people are just passionate about the industry. And it's what a great way to go to work every day, to be surrounded by people that are doing what they want to be doing, and in many cases are living their dreams. And that's not just true for pilots and mechanics, but for across the spectrum of the folks that work in aviation. So whatever your interest is, it can be applied to aviation as a business to help us be successful. And it's a great place to work. It's a great industry to be part of. It's an exciting industry. It's changed the world in only little over 100 years. It's amazing the impact it's had on lives for the good. But it's not without challenges and new challenges every day that we've got to be able to face to continue to be able to bring these kinds of things to the public. So all I can say is well, I think that says it all, actually.
Yeah. But Doug, can you give us an example of some of the opportunities specifically like in a flight department, a corporate flight department and things like that? You got a little experience in that area.
Well, I do. And sure. But I mean, it's just a microcosm of any other aviation organization, right? But we have people. First of all, there is no one role in the aviation organization that's more important than another. It takes a team to succeed. And all of the people that contribute to that team are critical to making that happen. And regardless of your role or responsibility, if you fail to meet our expectations of you, the rest of the team suffers as well. So we depend on one another. We've got to have somebody that can create schedules to take, which is just when we get a schedule in a corporate flight department, it's just taking an order to go somewhere. And somebody's got to process that order and build it and deliver it and account for it. We have to do that safely. We have to do it efficiently. And so we have roles for pilots, mechanics, safety people, dispatchers, people that can do good event planning, people that can have finance backgrounds so that we can make sure that we're doing it and we're spending our money in responsible ways. Again, it's just a business and all of those features are there. We depend on folks like Jim and his team to help us with legal matters of all kinds. And so you'd be surprised if how your interest can't find a way into the aviation industry. I'll give you the best example. I know there's Jim and I have a friend. He's a very famous aviation photographer. maybe one of the most famous aviation photographers in the world. And he's not a pilot, and he started his career in advertising, taking pictures of pizza, because Pizza Hut was a big client of his. He just happened to be doing it in Wichita and discovered the aviation industry there. And now aviation is the core of his life, but he's a photographer. So I think it's a great metaphor for opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and there are a lot of it's a great example of so many opportunities that exist. Aimee, Jim had mentioned earlier about the Why I Fly, which I actually think is just a great thing, because every one of us who flies can tell you why we fly. So I think that's really clever to have that. But I think Jim wanted you to expand a little bit more about what you guys are doing with that particular initiative.
Sure. That's and it's kind of an exciting another part of our Discovering Flight series, and it is with our partners at Hemlock Films. We've created a series, and by the end of the year, we'll have 24 of these short 3-minute videos that take people from just a range. We have everyone from pilots to authors to, there's a young woman who started her own aviation welding business who's featured in the series. And it just gives a little background of how they got into it, what they do in their career, what their path was to get there. And the goal of that series is it's really two.
We lost you there for a second. It dropped off. I don't know if you can hear us. While we're waiting for Aimee to come back in, the next thing I wanted to really start talking about is the upcoming enshrinement ceremony that takes place on Friday, September 22nd, in about 3 weeks actually from tomorrow. So there she goes. Aimee, we lost you for a bit.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Before we go into another area, did you finish what you were saying? Because it kind of cut you off.
Oh, no problem. I don't know how much of what I said you got, but I just think that the series is really there in order to show people the breadth of careers that exist and do it in this really fun, exciting way that appeals to young people. And we're sharing these videos with our classroom educators, online audience, but also here in our Heritage Hall and Education Center, where we get about 400,000 annual visitors who are learning about these different career options in our Discovering Flight Theater.
And
absolutely.
Aimee, if you could talk, Aimee, for just a second too about the Innovation Center and what's going on in Heritage Hall, and then we're going to shift. Vince is going to shift us over to the enshrinement. But I just wanted everybody to know more about the education programs.
Absolutely. So in addition to reaching students in the classroom, as I said, we get about 400,000 visitors here in our Heritage Hall and Education Center. And part of our goal with Discovering Flight is transforming that space so that it's meeting learners today where they are, giving them a more interactive experience that inspires them to take part in the future of aviation. And so the first part of that transformation we did last year, and that was the installation of our theater. And this year in January, we're going to break ground on the installation of a Discovering Flight Innovation Laboratory. And that's sort of this small classroom space where we can host our field trip groups that come in and give them an opportunity to roll up their sleeves and dig into some of the fun projects and interactives that we have in our curriculum so that they can continue learning. One of the coolest things I think in that space is called a hackeronics lab, where we just have all these different parts of from aviation, from planes, engines, where kids are able to sort of deconstruct them using simple tools and get a sense of how some of the things that make planes fly work. And so, yeah, we're excited for that space to open up in April of 2024. And we'll have an incredible standards aligned classroom visit curriculum that will go along with all those spaces, so that the groups that come can be assured to have a really incredible experience that helps move their learning forward.
That sounds pretty exciting. I was stuck on 400,000 people coming a year, but
we get a great group.
Yeah, that's quite a turnout. So that's really great. And what age range is this going to be really geared towards?
So we get visitors of all ages here in the Heritage Hall and Education Center, but at the Hall of Fame, we're focusing our efforts on that pre-K through 6th grade range. And I think it's because we want to partner with our colleagues in the aviation industry who are focusing more on the middle and high school grades, but also because we see the need to really capture the interests of young people before what research tells us is they start to lose confidence in their abilities at about the 6th, 7th grade. And so we want to get them interested in aviation, capture them early so that they are inspired to keep moving through even those challenging years.
You know, Vince, a lot of those young people that come through the Heritage Hall and Education Center that will go through the Innovation Lab are coming there with their parents. And if their parents see them having an experience that attracts them and that they're interested in, their parents can learn how to help them promote that and build that confidence too. So it's true. It's focusing so much on young people, but it's also important to help parents understand how they can help their kids achieve some of their dreams.
Doug, I think you bring up a fantastic point, because parents have a big part in this in terms of and you have mentioned, and others have mentioned, you know, we don't always have parents that know about our industry or understand it or even necessarily encourage us to pursue it. So the fact that you can educate parents as well and let them know about the opportunities and the possibilities and let some of that passion rub off onto them that hopefully then translates to their kids. I think it's a really good point. I say not only parents or guardians, but also counselors and teachers and administrators. And so a lot of these programs like what you guys are doing and are going to expand doing, and some of the other aviation alphabet organizations that are also doing similar type of things, I think it's really great because it really gets the people involved that need to be involved. So hats off to that.
All of these wonderful programs that Aimee's talking about are, there's more information on the website, which is nationalaviation.org. And people who are interested in that, it lists all of our enshrinees, it lists all the education programs we're doing. And it encourages all of these people to become members of the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
So let's talk about the enshrinees. Let's talk about, first of all, the ones that are being inducted this year, the class of 2023. If you guys can tell us a little bit about that. And we can also reflect on some of the ones that have been inducted in the past and what that all entails.
Well, I was thinking about just focusing on a few people from the past, and maybe Doug can walk us through the new enshrinees for this year. But as you said earlier, we go all the way back to Orville and Wilbur Wright and Charles Lindbergh and Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, Charles McGee, who you took care of and spent a lot of time with from the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yep.
I was
General Charles McGee. Mm-hmm.
I was pleased to be with you when he was inducted and then kept coming back every year. Sean D.
Absolutely.
Tucker, Tom Poberesny, Patty Wagstaff, Clay Lacey, Jim Lovell from Apollo 13. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, a wonderful group. And we have a number of those people coming back for the enshrinement this year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We can talk
you
about
mentioned
that, but
Charlie Bolden is going to be there, and Clay Lacey's going to be there, and Joan Garrett Sullivan, Dale Clapmeyer. So yeah. And of course,
Yeah.
Sean Tucker.
Sean Tucker. Yeah. Eileen Collins is going to be there.
And Eileen, yes. Yeah, she was the
Bob
first.
Crippen.
She was the first to be a command pilot for the space shuttle.
She's a terrific lady, and we're delighted to have her back. Yeah. Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about the really exciting class that we have coming in for this year?
Well, be glad to, Jim. And, you know, our enshrinees, we have a large class we're enshrining this year, 6 enshrinees, which is unusual for us. Usually it's 4 or 5. It's a class that reflects America, and it's their legacies and their histories are all very different, but they all share in common these accomplishments that they've had in aviation. Angela Gittins, who was a force in the international airport world, a woman who led the Atlanta airport, before that the Miami airport, and for almost 20 years led the Airport Council International, which is the largest professional organization for airports in the world. Is one. Fred Hayes, who is an astronaut, a naval aviator, flew in the Marine Corps, has the distinction to have an honorable discharge from 3 military services: the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Air Force, well, 3 of whom he flew for. He was a NASA research pilot before becoming an astronaut, and he was the lunar module pilot for Apollo 13. And then we have Velta Ben, who was a trailblazer and a trendsetter in aviation. This is a woman who learned to fly in 1942, was in the Women Air Corps during World War II, a flight instructor teaching military pilots how to go, that went off to war, began making aviation films in an early time, and was the first woman to ever land an aircraft on an aircraft carrier. Cornelius Coffey was a civil rights activist, a pilot, and an inventor. He was one of the original champions for African-American participation in the aviation industry. He invented the carburetor heater. For those of you learning to fly, he's the one that came up with carburetor heat.
Carb heat, yeah.
But he broke down barriers to become a mechanic, to become a pilot, and to open the door for other people to do the same. He established a flight school and an aeronautics institute in Chicago, and trained many of the original Tuskegee Airmen. And then the next 2, we had Ed Stimpson, who was an industry advocate. He was the founding leader of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. We could spend a lot of time talking about the economic impact of general aviation on the U.S. economy. And GAMA is the organization that represents the companies that lie at the heart of that industry. And he created a program called Takeoff that was put into place a number of years ago. It was a 3-year program to encourage young people to learn how to fly, and it had amazing success in getting more people into aviation and aviation careers. He's a past chairman of the board of trustees of the Flight Safety Foundation, and was appointed by President Clinton to be the U.S. ambassador to the International Civil Aviation Organization. Also a past trustee of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And last but not least, and perhaps is Catherine Sullivan, who was the first American woman to walk in space. She's an astronaut, a scientist, an educator. She's not only walked in space, she's done a dive into the deep sea to the Challenger Deep, which is the lowest or deepest known place on Earth. A geologist by training with a PhD. She joined NASA in 1978 in the very first group of women to join the astronaut corps, and did her first flight into space aboard Space Shuttle Challenger in 1984, and flew twice more after that. And after leaving NASA, was a chief scientist for the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, where she later became the deputy and then associate administrator. So we got a great class of people. It's going to be a really, really exciting group to be part of that evening. And those of you that are listening that might have the interest to join us in Washington, I encourage you to do it. You're going to meet people and hear stories that you'll remember for a lifetime.
Yeah. What's the best way for them to find out more about it? I guess to go to your website, nationalaviation.org.
That's correct. That's all the details are right there on the main page of our website.
Yeah. So, it's very important about the history or the historical factor in our industry in aviation and aerospace. Could I ask each of you to speak to that and give your perspective of why it is so important that we continue to champion, the leaders of the past and the legends in the industry?
I'll be glad to jump in on that to start, because it's really not about the past, it's about the future. And I'll tell you that the story about one of my own 3 children. My youngest daughter had an interest in engineering, and she has a degree in mechanical engineering from Vanderbilt University. And one of the things that I discovered when she was an engineering student is that there was a lack of role models for her, that because there weren't a lot of women in engineering, and they were even fewer on the faculty where she went to school. And so it was important for me to help find people that she could identify with and that she could find as an inspiration and role model for herself. I knew engineers in 2 fields. And that was the oil and gas industry and the aviation industry. She didn't have any interest at all in the oil and gas industry. So I was able to introduce her to some very, very successful women with engineering careers in aviation. And it led to her having an learning to fly, but also having an internship with Sikorsky helicopters while she was a student. And it changed her outlook about that. And so in a sense, she had a similar experience that I had, that where a school teacher was able to inspire me. Having role models in our lives really is important. And you know what I had mentioned about following your passions, believing in yourself and not giving up, that's good advice for a young person. It's a good advice to follow as you grow older. And when you get to be our age, it's still good advice.
Speak for yourself. No, I'm just kidding. I totally agree with you, actually. Jim or Aimee?
I can jump in. I think I can only second what Doug says. Absolutely. We need people to be able to see themselves in aviation. But I think for me, the other piece of that is that the stories that we share about those people who are enshrined in the National Aviation Hall of Fame are stories of perseverance. They are, pushing boundaries and testing yourself. And I think that those stories, sharing them, celebrating them, provide the inspiration that today's young people need in order to take on their own challenges.
Gosh, that's very well said. I couldn't agree with you more about that. And I also love what Doug said about mentorship and role models. I think that's our job, for those of us who've been in this industry forever and a day, to take that opportunity and inspire some young person to get into this industry, and why it can be very rewarding and a lot of fun for them to do so. And I think that in terms of the mentorship and role model aspects of this, one of the things that young people kind of sometimes, not all, but some miss out on, is not taking advantage of a situation where they could interact with people that, an experienced pilot or somebody else that does something. You're talking about a young lady that started her own, aviation welding business in aviation maintenance. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. I saw that video, by the way. I may figure out a way to drop it in the show in post-production, but it's pretty cool. That's a real neat example of how, the opportunities are abundant in this industry and everything. Jim?
I just like to say that really, from a historical standpoint, this industry isn't that old. Think about, I went in 2003 to Kitty Hawk for the 100th anniversary of flight. And my father started flying, like 16 years after the Wright brothers. And I flew with him in business jets in the Saberliner back before they had simulators. And, a pilot would come out of a Beech 18 and now trying to get a type rating in a jet with no simulator. It was so from the standpoint of safety,
Flying by the seat of your pants.
yeah, from the standpoint of safety, it's amazing how the industry has developed. And now we have all these simulators that, you can get your type rating in a 747 and then you go to the airplane. One of my pilot friends went to the airplane. He had to ask the hostess how to get to the cockpit. But I won't say what airline that was. And then the development now of all these safety things. I mean, with Garmin, when you can push a button and an airplane will land it for you. I mean, when I first started practicing aviation law, it's like it's crash litigation. There was, you bought 5 acres of land and waited, you might have a crash. It was pretty bad. And so I just think that this whole industry has developed based on these heroes. And we're honoring Tyson Wise at this event and giving him the Armstrong Award because he and his partner co-founded ForeFlight, which has become just a great safety program that basically all pilots, all airline pilots, everybody uses on their iPad just to, and it's been a great safety device. And then
It's the go-to aviation tool.
Yeah, and then you've got Garmin, who created and brought GPS into the aviation industry, and this, as I say, the safety things that they've done. And we don't talk about firefighters and life-saving EMS and hurricane relief, and there's all these other things that we do in the industry to help people, and they're all can be done because of the safety innovations that have come along. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. When you talk about safety and you talk about the different uses of it, I think we're so used to aviation. I say we in general, everybody, the entire world is so used to it that we take a lot of things for granted. But you hear things like when they had the tragic fire over in Maui, how they had the helicopters that were normally used for tourists bringing over supplies and things like that. And those are things in that particular case that only a helicopter or a float plane could actually do effectively. So, hearing about those type of uses of the aircraft and things like that are great. The safety, I couldn't say it better than you, Jim, about that. I mean, the things that we have in play, like the Garmin Autoland, which I was just blown away about that. By the way, I thought, well, really, just push the button, and it not only does it take over the aircraft, it searches for a good airport, it talks to air traffic control, and it talks to the passengers to say, hey, I got this, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about it. And then, finds an airport and makes a perfect landing. I mean, doesn't get much better than that. So I'll cite, go ahead.
And now you have companies with the, vertical lift for the urban and regional.
Advanced air mobility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, advanced air mobility. And that is amazing. We have helped some of those companies, and it's just stunning to see the technology. And one of the companies is looking at by 2028 having an autonomous operation approved, where you're going to be a passenger sitting in there and your pilot's going to be talking to you remotely. Yeah.
And we thought the Jetsons was just a cartoon.
Yeah.
So, but now it's really, you're right. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing to see the development of that technology. And that brings us full circle back to how there are so many opportunities, because somebody has to design that. And as I like to say, it's whether it's designing that kind of technology, or whether you're somebody that has the ability to design the interior of an aircraft, the cabin, makeup and things like that. Connectivity is a big deal now. And we could go on and on and on about it. So bringing it full circle back to the National Aviation Hall of Fame, I think what the Hall of Fame does is it brings attention to people that are very accomplished, but it also, as Doug said, it points to the future in terms of opportunities that can come about. So I applaud that.
Can I add that we have the greatest airspace system in the world because of the FAA and because of the way that it's all being operated and set up. And we're honoring this year Congressman Sam Graves and Senator Moran, who are the two congressional leaders who have really driven both general aviation and airline legislation in the Congress. Because it all starts with having that type of leadership team to work with all the rest of us in the industry to make it work. As Doug says,
no, that's great that you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because they have both been tremendous advocates for the industry from the government side of things. And that's been really important. And I've seen both of them in action. Just recently saw Sam Graves in action in reference to the FAA reauthorization bill and all of his efforts with that. And if we didn't have people like that were there, yes, they're a little biased, they're passionate about aviation, but they do the work. And it's we've benefited from it as those of us working in the industry.
That's why we have the greatest aviation in the world here. We want to keep it. And it's also an opportunity for careers where if somebody wants to go into government, they could go work for one of these congressmen as an aide or whatever. And it's just another career path.
Absolutely. As we kind of start to wrap things up, is there anything else that we have not talked about in reference to the National Aviation Hall of Fame, your initiatives, and in particular about the upcoming enshrinement ceremony?
Aimee, do you want to?
I guess the only thing we haven't touched on, with the award winners, just wanted to share, we have 2 more awards that we're giving out in addition to inducting our 6 enshrinees. And that is every year we award the Scott A. Crossfield Teacher of the Year Award. And this year that award is going to Megan Tucker. She is a STEAM specialist and Dean of Curriculum at Hillsborough Charter Academy in Hillsborough, Virginia. And I can barely give words to what an incredible inspirational teacher she is. Her nomination for that award was just incredible. The innovative things that she has done as a teacher to bring aviation into her classroom and inspire and support her teachers. So I'm excited to give that award out this year. And then we're also giving out our Milton Caniff Spirit of Flight Award. And that award this year will go to the Jet Propulsion Laboratories Mars helicopter team, Ingenuity. And we're just so excited. If you get a chance to look at our iFlies, you'll see one that has the Ingenuity flight engineer, Teddy Tesnedos, speaking about his work on that project. But they're that incredible team put together this thing that has really pushed us forward, and that project has passed all expectations. So we're excited to honor them this year as well at our president's reception.
Yeah, it's really good that you brought that up. And yeah, that Mars Ingenuity helicopter, I mean, it has surpassed expectations. It's also lasted a lot longer than they had it planned for. And just the whole concept of putting something together that would fly in a different atmosphere, that they had to figure that out, and then getting it there and launching it and getting it to do the type of exploration that it's done. I have to admit, I was pretty excited about it when it first happened, and I've been kind of keeping track. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So yeah, and it's really neat that you guys have expanded beyond just the enshrinees and added these other elements in that are very important to acknowledge. I was raised by educators, so I totally get it about the importance of teachers. Obviously, Doug, your fifth grade teacher had a huge impact on you, and I'm sure we can all tell about a teacher or a professor that had a huge impact in our life in terms of its inspiring us, if not necessarily in aviation, just in general to do well and to succeed and things like that. So
could I just add something when you're, I just want to say
Sure.
that I want to thank you, but I also want to say that I need to thank our, we have a board of trustees that are terrific and do a lot of work. We have terrific sponsors, and the state of Ohio has been terrific to the National Aviation Hall of Fame and Congressman Turner there. And I almost want to say thanks to, to our sponsors, NBAA, Gamma, Boeing, Avelo Airlines, GE Aerospace, the Army Aviation Group, Hartzell Propeller. There's just a ton of people, and that's just touching it. But we're sending out a press release today that if any of the listeners want to see that, which talks about honoring all of the people that we're honoring, talks about the program on Friday night, talks about the president's reception on Thursday night, and anybody that wants to get involved and can get a hold of Aimee to see how to attend. And we hope everybody can come because it's going to be a great evenings.
So as we wrap things up, I always like to do what I call an around the room. And I'm going to start with Aimee. And Aimee, any final comments about all of this related to the National Aviation Hall of Fame?
Sure. Yeah, first, a heartfelt thank you for having us on the show today. It's been an honor to share the things that we're doing here at the Hall of Fame. And I guess I'll just leave with encouraging everyone to support organizations like the National Aviation Hall of Fame and other organizations that resonate with you. Together, we can support this incredible industry and inspire the next generation of the aviation workforce.
Very well said. Doug?
Well, Vince, thanks for organizing this and inviting us to be part of your broadcast and tell our story. I know you have a very broad spectrum of participants who view your programs, and if we've said something that you're interested in having any follow-up on, as Jim mentioned, and just reach out through the website and somebody can follow up with you. If you're a school teacher and you've been inspired by some of the things that you've heard Aimee talking about, once again, maybe there's a conversation you could start together about how you could get your hands on some of these materials as well. And we hope to meet you at the Hall of Fame itself sometime or another event.
Thank you very much. Jim, take us home.
Okay. I forgot to mention our presenting sponsor, Cirrus, which would have been a serious oversight. Pat Waddick, sorry about that. And we have other presenters at this program that we haven't talked about. Fig Newton is going to be one of the presenters. The NASA administrator is going to be there. Ed Bowen, Pete Bunce. It's going to be a great event. And I just want to say thank you, Vince, for letting us get the word out. And I hope that the National Aviation Hall of Fame can continue to represent the United States and report to Congress and continue to inspire future leaders.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be available to talk about the National Aviation Hall of Fame and really give us some insight on what it all is about and the importance of it as part of our aviation group, so to speak, our aviation family. So thank each of you for that. And I wish you guys continued success with it as it grows and as you expand your initiatives on education and STEAM, Aimee, and everything that it represents. So I look forward every year to being able to rub elbows with aviation royalty and being there. It's a really uplifting and inspiring atmosphere to be at. It's also great sometimes when you see a few young people that are able to attend as guests of somebody and things like that, and see, you know, that the look on their face when they can't believe that they're standing next to an astronaut or to somebody that's been flying for, 50 years or whatever the case may be. Somebody like a Clay Lacey who logged over 60,000 hours or something crazy like that. So it's pretty neat stuff. Or Martha and John King, who I took their first private pilot course too long ago to tell you how many years it was. So let's just say I was flying a Cessna 150. That'll give you a hint. But
Vince, our closing ceremony is Mark Armstrong doing high flight. The son of
oh, right.
Earth.
Yeah.
And he's a terrific
awesome
guy. Where else can you come see people like that?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you guys for being a part of it. All Things Aviation and Aerospace is a video webcast and an audio podcast presentation of the Private Air Media Group, which after today's live stream is available to watch on demand via my Private Air Media YouTube channel, Facebook Live page, and LinkedIn Live page. Or you can listen to it as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next week, please take care, stay safe, safe flying if you're a pilot like me,